Hey, this is Misery Loves Company, a weekly social reading series hosted by miserytourism.com. Every Friday, we welcome outsider and transgressive writers to come and share their work with us. And it's a Friday again, guys, so we might as well get going here. First up tonight is Coleman.
Hey everybody.
Hey,
Um,
possibly
hey
reading for the
buddy.
last time under that name, I'm told.
Yeah, so I realized I'm writing now under pseudonyms, but I realized I didn't really do a farewell to my old name. So these are some poems kind of about my life, uh, that aren't under my pseudonym, that are under my real name, and they're the last of those types for the foreseeable future. So, um, this one's called Generalized Anxiety. Imperfect solitude, waking up to my cat's ass. I make Earl Grey because coffee makes me nervous. The morning is fog. I don't know what I need, but your tears make me nervous. There's pain outside. It's too cold for one of our picnics. A pearlescent sadness hangs over this city. You hug me from behind. Surprise attacks make me nervous. I remember to remember us. Stress lowers lifespan. I want another hug face to face to stop being nervous. This is Thursday Night Moves. Oh, also, and yeah, there will be much more penis poetry under my alter egos. So yeah, but this is Thursday Night Moves. I play Call of Duty online with my brother. It's easier to talk when we're not face to face. My cat needs my stomach. There's so much love on me I sink through the couch, through the earth's crust and into its core. I live where, in science book cross sections, the planet's wound burns. This one's what I think about when I want to die. A chocolate coated shotgun barrel, my cat. This one's hypothetical diary entry, or Coleman Bomar's last poem. Darwin says we were lizards. $3,000 later, my cat's alive. She swallowed a needle. Mostly I complain on Word documents. There are people who would love to hurt and kiss me. I don't know what tomorrow holds but itself. All right. That's it for me. Thank you guys.
Rest in peace to Coleman Bomar. Long live Cletus, I guess. Coleman, these were wonderful as usual. I really love the anxiety poem because it is such a gentle and kind of mournful poem about anxiety. It's like the vibe of the poem is not fundamentally and exclusively anxious. It's not a wound up poem. Instead, it has this kind of like ephemeral kind of vibe with the fog and with all of these descriptions in it. And I really appreciate how that like subverts your expectations for a poem about anxiety. And also, I have to say, we have the same like morning routine. I've got the same problem. I can't drink coffee, so I have a cup of Earl Grey every morning instead. But anyway, I love the like final Coleman Bomar poem. I love the thing about the juxtaposition of the line about Darwin and the line about spending $3,000 to save the life of your cat, because that's like the when people say that like we're fundamentally just animals, when people like downplay what human civilization has accomplished in the last few thousand years, I think like a great like counterpoint to that is like the fact that the our animals live lives that are way more lavish and way more like yeah, and way like richer than the lives that like of like people, human beings just a couple of hundred years ago, right? So there had like that juxtaposition, like it's so hard to reconcile, like of like what biology tells us about what humans are and what we've proven ourselves capable of. And I don't know, all of these pieces are great, as your pieces often are, but yeah, thanks, man.
Thanks a lot, William. I think that's great. You drink Earl Grey. It's the superior beverage in my opinion. So
It's the best tea, easily. I agree with you, man. Anyway, um, Bizarre says cats have escaped capitalism. Discuss. Cats haven't escaped capitalism. They've extended capitalism. All right.
Yeah,
All
well,
right.
that chocolate covered shotgun line, that's a good line.
Oh, Rudy, thank you for bringing that up because Coleman, you had an earlier version of that poem that was longer, right? Am I wrong about that? And now you've trimmed it down.
yeah, I've just cut it down to that.
Hmm.
I think that's a cool idea because you like caught
Hmm.
captured the essence of what you were doing in that poem in just 2 lines now, where you have like the absurd suicidal thing, and then you have the counterbalance to that, the like gentle thing that convinces you to continue living, or the thing that has like some kind of intrinsic emotional value. Anyway, that's a
That's
great
fucking
poem as
awesome.
well. Rudy, you might as well.
I'm gonna read some League of Legends poetry. These are all haikus. Shout out to Coleman, I guess. Um,
Yes.
so these are probably really dumb, and probably nobody knows the characters, but a couple of people here who remain nameless. Maybe other people know them. I don't know who's played League of Legends, but yeah. This first one's called Lee Sin. Lee Sin is a character who self-immolate, who in the actual canonical lore of long ago self-immolated to protest the League of Legends tournament, which is the tournament that you're playing in the game. I don't know, it's really stupid, but they changed the lore because they're basically pussies. So, but anyway, this one's called Lee Sin. They're invading. Callous world turns a blind eye. Are you blind, faggot? This one is called Anivia. Anivia is a cryo phoenix who shoots ice and shit. Wall caused some wailing. Zero tolerance language. One bad egg spoils all. This one is called Lysandra, and Lysandra is my favorite character in the League of Legends. Freeze alone, entombed, among protected wildlife. We're all in on him. This one, oh, excuse me. This one is called Briar, and Briar is a newer champion that was, as far as I can tell, designed basically for foot fetishes and lunatics. Ravenous hunger. Fantasies bare feet yield to real life's grippy socks. This one is called Lucian, and Lucian is a black character. And in the Chinese version of League of Legends, in the Chinese community, he's called Obama, which is pretty cool, I think. In this fucking house, we vote against Obama or for a forfeit. This one is about Amumu, the sad and lonely mummy. COVID kid mummy or last Yordle emperor. Choose your Tulpa well. This next one, just to explain a little bit, it's about a champion called Galio, who's this big golem that eats magic and comes to life. And he has a skin called Gatekeeper Gallo. That's what the skin is called. And when I play with that skin, I usually quote the W Path things because I'm really insane and retarded. And they haven't banned me yet, but they might. So magic snuffed rouses the Gatekeeper Galio. Give me hormones. No. This one is called Vex. Vex is a really depressed Yordle, which is a goblin or something. I don't know. Depression hopping between friends. Ultimate Vex. Shadow, carry me. This one is called Syndra. Syndra's like a sorceress who shoots balls or something. Huxley once told her, potential is limitless. Her and every mid. This one is called Kled, and Kled is basically Nathaniel Bedford Forrest as a Yordle, which, as I've mentioned previously, is a goblin. Seeing Gray mostly, that dog McClellan at night, Civil War and Team. This is called Yumi. Yumi is a magical cat who has some quirks, and a lot of players who play Yumi are actually really fucking toxic. Solo Q Panzer. When you ride alone, my friend, you ride with Hitler. This one is about LeBlanc. LeBlanc is the deceiver. Drug-free, League fills void. Miss the E, no stun, no fun. Miss, miss, miss. E hits. This one is about Kale, who's some fucking knight angel or some shit, I don't know. By my teens, Descent. Kale beasts at 16, shreds tanks. Wish I was just 6. This one is about Poppy, a Yordle with imposter syndrome, literally. Imposter extras. Each act lends them sick voice work. Me? The hero? Nah. This one is about Vayne, the vampire hunter. Your bot lane, dun, dun. You probably think that this is about you, don't you? Oh, this one is about Tom Kench, who's a big frog, I think. And he basically eats, or he's a fish man. He's a big catfish, that's what he is. And he eats people. My dad was drafted. He attack Tom Kench. Gooks in the Nom Trench. This one is about Caitlin, the sheriff of Piltover. Sheriff books Tarek. Can a god do buggery? Can a ranger top? And this final one is about a really hated character called Master Yi. They call him Master Q because all he does is press Q to win, basically. The Q button on your keyboard. Q, 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 Q. Q, Q, W. Q, Q, R, Q, 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 Q. And that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, Master Yi.
I made the mistake when I opened up the document of looking down and seeing the Master Q one or the Master Yi one first, and that kind of ruined the other ones for me. Oh God. The I First of all, I have a bone to pick with you.
No, I didn't. When I said Yumi, I didn't mean you. This is actually
Uh-huh.
like documented. Yumi players are more toxic because of the fact that Yumi rides on the other champion, so their ADC has to be better than most ADCs because they have to be able to dodge without the other person in the lane. That's just how Yumi is. It's not about your Yumi.
Are you saying I was one of the less toxic Yumis?
Well, yeah. I mean,
The hesitation there says it all.
I think our Yumi Heimer was actually pretty good, honestly.
Yeah, nothing about playing League of Legends was ever good.
Yeah.
Man, what I love about these is like you take a different approach in each one. Like some of them are clearly like jokes about the discourse around League of Legends, like the like the Master Yi one, or like the final line of the Lee Sin one where it's like Are you blind? Like, where it's basically like some team chat shit, right? Which is great since like the character is blind, obviously, and
Yeah, he was blinded
it
when he
like
saw
leads
Emily.
into the like fucking the toxic lol discourse. But
Mhm.
others are just like just why like the the Tom Kench one being about your dad's experience in Vietnam, and um other ones just be like the Caitlyn one basically being a joke about like about the narciss. So many of these are like actually multiple of these are jokes about the like narcissism of people, how different people in different lanes like view their roles. Like Caitlyn is about top, and then you have the one about that's making fun of mids and how they like think that they're the only ones that matter. And then you have the one with Vayne where it's like, yeah, he's in bottom lane, and so every kill has to be his, right? But
Yeah,
so these are
allegedly.
these are all really, really good. I have to ask you though, and I bet you knew I was going to ask this if it was
Mhm.
intentional. The second line of the
Yo,
Lissandra, is that a Lolita reference?
yes, yep.
Ah, you will never
See, look,
Lolita reference by me, motherfucker. That's
I figured not. What is
uh,
it like? Happy, happy is Mr. McFate or is gnarled McFate? Fucking, it's that part.
yeah,
Yeah,
it said something plowing his child
allowing us.
bride among the wildlife. It's from the poem,
Yeah,
like completely deranged poem that Humbert writes about Lolita after his mental breakdown about three-quarters of the way through the novel.
yeah.
Um,
With that Lissandra line, like one, like basically,
yeah,
like
because
so.
jungle, right?
Well, not no. Her alt can be used on herself or on someone else. So it's like and you have to kind of choose it whether you use it on yourself to freeze yourself and make yourself untargetable, or you can hit the other person with it, go all in and deal the damage, and fucking that's the deal with damage. So it's kind of a reference to like it's like oh you can like pretty much like be alone or you can go all in on someone who might like hurt you or what. I mean, sort of. I guess it's sort of like something like
Gotcha, gotcha. The
that.
But the protected wildlife thing, that's not a reference to like
No,
jungle or
no, not really. It's just like because when you're untargetable, so you're just protected. You're basically
Oh,
like the
okay. Gotcha, gotcha,
yep.
gotcha. Anyway, man, that was very
Anyway,
good stuff. And the
thanks.
Master Yi one fucking killed me.
Rip.
That was exactly how I would play Master Yi too. It was just because
That's how
that's
everyone
all it is. It's you hit Q a bunch of times, and then once the cooldown's gone on your R, you hit the R, and you
and
hit
bust the
your
turret.
ult, and then you
Yeah,
fucking hit Q some more.
fuck yeah.
Anyway, all right, okay. Enough about that. Thanks, Rudy. Cat is up next.
Hey, okay. I'm gonna post the link in here. So I wrote this poem yesterday, and it's kind of a fucking mess, but I really like it, so we're gonna read it anyway. And it kind of hinges on that one scene in Mulholland Drive where they go behind the diner and there's like the bum behind the diner or whatever, and the guy passes out. Um, but if you haven't seen it, hopefully, you'll still get it. And I don't know what I'm actually calling this yet. I have it. It's strange calling yourself because it's also a line from the film, but I feel like I'm probably gonna change it. And I'm really nervous because this poem is not done and also about my weird gender bullshit. So congratulations. Okay. It's strange calling yourself. I fuck the confidence man for confidence, the renaissance man for a renaissance, the mailman thinking I could get away with it if I never read this poem out loud, the middleman convinced I'd get somewhere incrementally. It was good with the manly man until he called me a good girl and I collapsed Mulholland Drive style, the man in back of this place, who's of course also played by a woman. He took me from behind there in the Winkies parking lot, tilting my head to meet her eyes. I strike out with Kinsey scale zeros and men who believe in a god. They always want to fight me differently than I want to fight them. People keep sending me photos of Butch Kristen Stewart on the cover of Rolling Stone. The pull quote, she wants to grow a happy trail, a little mustache, and it feels like the cops are outside. Jig is up and I'll roll over soon. Beg mercy, submit, I promise. Just tell me one more time that I'm the aggressor. Why this Winkies? It's kind of embarrassing. I had a dream about this place. Are you wearing a wire? I want to fuck Butch Kristen Stewart differently than she'd want to fuck me. You would like Barry Cogan and Saltburn, they say. And I know they're thinking of that scene where he sucks Jacob Elordi's cum out of the tub drain, and I do, and only half because I'm down so damn bad and disgusting. I'm not like other girls. I want you in a way that should scare you, the way drains want water. Okay, so you had a dream about this place. Tell me. You're standing right over there by that counter. You're in both dreams and you're scared too. I get even more frightened when I see how afraid you are and then I realize what it is. There's a man back of this place. He's the one who's doing it. I can see him through the wall. I can see his face. I want to fuck Barry Cogan, but don't relate to people online who want to fuck Barry Cogan because I want to be Barry Cogan, the way Barry Cogan in Saltburn wants to be Jacob Elordi. Had to stand on your street for hours posing with my broken bike just to get here. Get you to hold me down and say I'm not like the other girls, fingers curled around my throat like scare quotes. So you came to see if he's out there. I nod, to get rid of this god awful feeling. That is all I got.
All right, Kat, I really fucking dig this poem. What I dig most about this is like the intricate, like double strand construction of it, because you have it like this gets at something like really fascinating about identity that I think like people are often, I don't want to say scared to talk about that, but that people are often afraid to confront, even in literature, because the discourse around gender is often so fraught, and
Like
also because
strategic
like
reasons. Like no turning your back for a second.
right, and also because obviously this poem like leans into the like autogynephilia thing, which is like a huge like no topic in like trans discourse, right? But setting that like aside, that sense of like that like dual strand approach in this poem where it's like one half of the poem is about sexuality and the other half is about identity, and the way the two like weave together and that uncertainty, it's like, do I want to be this or fuck this, right? Like that is the approach here, I think, is on the one hand like really ambiguous and really delicate, and on the other hand very frank and very overt, and I don't think you often get like both of those things at once in a piece of poetry. And the way it's handled here is like really, really fucking effective. And also like that sense of like there being multiple strands to the poem is well executed within the poem structurally, where you'll have things that pop in and out. Like instead of having like a single like stanza or multiple like consecutive stanzas about the Saltburn thing, it's there and then it's gone and then it's back. And the same thing with the Mulholland, excuse me, Drive reference, where it's there, it fades out, it comes back. And the Christian Stewart thing, it's there, it fades out, it comes back. So you have this sense of these like multiple interwoven strands that I think do a really good job of like mimicking what the poem is about thematically, which is like identity and the intricacy of that. There are also just some really fucking sublime lines in this poem. The fucking fingers curled around my throat like scare quotes line is fucking, that's sublime. I wish I had written that. That's really fucking good. Anyway, that's it's a great poem, Kat, is what I'm saying. Thank you for reading it. And Colton is up next.
Hello.
Hey Colton, how's it going, man?
Good. I've had a lot of weird well, I finished the book that I read from last was it The Wind? Oh fuck, I forgot the name of it. I almost just quoted a movie title, but I finished that book. I'm reading the Pinball 1973 book. And that's gonna go well. And there's been a weird like repetition of the year 1974. It's just come up so many times. I don't know. I just had to like get it on camera before I get killed somehow by somebody who's like 1974 adjacent. I don't know. I feel like I'm in that like weird. I think it's that Jim Carrey movie where it's like 13 or like something. I don't know. Anyways, I've got a long fucking Word doc, so I'm gonna try and get started. I first let's see, there we go. So the picture there is Elmwood Cemetery. It's the main piece I'm gonna read tonight. It was for the writing contest that they had. I didn't win, but I am trying to develop this piece into maybe like a chapbook situation. I think maybe to submit to like Go City Press or something, maybe. I don't know. But before that, there's a little link if y'all see it. It's the I Have Been to New York poem by Giorgio de Chirico. And I've had it in my laptop for a few years, and it's a really nice poem that I like to read every now and then. So I'm reading a different copy of it, so it might be different, it might be the same. I don't know. This is I've Been to New York by Giorgio de Chirico. On the vast Atlantic Ocean between Europe and what is called the New Continent, there is a liquid frontier. God damn it. Every time it's always me. Okay, anyways. Over there, waves bubble. The water is lukewarm and soapy. A moist and humid warmth envelops the big vessels which roll and dance among the ghosts of caravels and half-fish emerge from the water with their mouth open in pursuit of an imaginary prey. It is the Gulf Stream. Up to this point, a passenger, regardless of what corner of Europe he comes from, is still breathing in the atmosphere of home, if one may say so. Once this frontier is crossed, one is on the other side. Whether it is better or worse, I do not know. What I know is that one is in a different world. In an imperceptible manner, everything has changed. One feels a little bit as if one had died. Clearly, one keeps moving, eating, smoking, strolling, chatting, reading, doing absolutely everything just as before. But in all of this, there is a trace of the movement of a ghost. Upon arriving in New York, everything that appears to you, the skyscrapers of Wall Street, the mist, the tugboats, the elongated white cubist architecture, properly lined up and reminiscent of the historical reconstructions of Babylon and of imperial Rome, executed in plaster after the plans and drawings of meticulous archaeologists. All of this is suffused with an otherworldly light. America has existed already for a few centuries as America. Big cities have been built, a deliberate and laborious people have expanded there and expanded ceaselessly. It seems to me, therefore, rather excessive to still call it the New World. America is no longer a new world, but is, and always will be, another world. It is not simply a question of whether the civilization, mentality, standards, social, economic, or technical progress are more or less advanced than in Europe. It is rather a question of molecules, climate, of different atmosphere, of the special quality of the sun's rays. The light and temperatures there are different. There is something of the humid torpor of a greenhouse, even in the middle of the winter. There is also the light of a greenhouse. In America, human beings and objects lose their shadow. There is also a strange softness. Everything is suppler as if it were made of the same substance. Human and animal bones, stones and metals appear less hard than in Europe. Everything is less hard and dry than in Europe. This explains the strange brightness of flowers, fruits, vegetables, and women's skin in America. This soft wariness, which weighs on everything, is also an otherworldly wariness. European from old Europe, go and visit. Wait, did I skip something? No. European from old Europe, go and visit New York if you can. Go and visit that feverish and dreamy city. There you will discover strange beauties. You will see apparitions which have nothing in common with what cinema and literature has shown of that country up till now. Behind the barrier of the ocean, behind the customs houses and the Irishmen with polished black guns, behind the ghosts in white gloves who unload the waste of seven sins in the pale light of dawn, you will find, again and again, in New York the magnificent, New York the eternally new, forgotten memories, memories which emerge over there as they do during the hours of half sleep, during those mysterious hours when soul and spirit, disengaged from logic and reality, solve a multitude of enigmas and problems otherwise insoluble, forgotten, alas, as soon as they are unraveled. Luxury and wealth, and an apotheosis of fireworks, create strange paradises in mysterious New York, in the very center of this immense and ancient, mechanical, and polymorphic city. These paradises carry us at a soft and imperceptible speed, without jolts and without hurdles, in padded sledges pulled silently by multicolored ducks and by the good storks of yesteryear. Splendid city of dream and a dream, city of windows, window city, storefront city. Before its storefronts parade day and night, like the characters of a very old clock, all the things of an enigmatic humanity, from the distant origins drowned in the mist of paleontology, of forests and caves, up to the spectacular and electrifying aspects of its future darkness. New York, the eternally new, draws us on its eternal parallels into the unlikely kaleidoscope of its storefronts, of its transparent towers, its magnificent bazaars, its windows lit throughout the long winter nights, where ineffable Dioscuri sleep, leaning against the harnesses of their exhausted horses, where the characters in a drama by Meyerling consult the sundials, bending over without seeing the long vistas and the rusty sabers that the one-eyed buccaneers, long since vanished, used to grasp in their clenched fists. In this forest of glass, of steel and concrete, in this extraordinary New York, difficult to define, traveler, you will find the gigantic masks of ancient gods. You will find the eternal sadness of plaster and Antinous in the immense loneliness of the Parthenon on summer nights, under the immense sky glittering with stars. Paris, January 29th, 1938. I chose to read that because I love Giorgio de Chirico and surrealism, and New York is suddenly a theme that is going to be in my life now, so that'll be exciting. I can't say too much about it. And also the piece talks about just the otherworldliness of places that have just been hyped up so much, and you go there, and it's just, I mean, truly breathtaking. And so I wanted to apply that to this guy named Old Larson, who traveled from Norway to America as Abraham Lincoln was shot and the Civil War was ending, and he went from Quebec to New York to Chicago to Memphis, all while there's a yellow fever going on, there's racial violence going on in Tennessee, and this person just had a really amazing life, and so I wrote about him. So this is and also this piece was inspired by Adam, because he has that character Larson, and so like that character was like in the back of my brain, but like I never like was like thinking about like taking anything just beyond like thinking like, okay, what if this guy who's coming to America and staring like death, violence, a plague, and like the disillusion of like a part of a country, and it's just like, you know what, I'm just gonna help people, and that is like what a more fucking Mormon would do. So this is Larson lends a helping hand. Shit. In 1844, the American prophet Joseph Smith, first president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, fled church headquarters in Nauvoo, Illinois, with his brother Hyrum Smith. After both men were unjustly imprisoned in Carthage, Illinois, Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum were shot dead in the Carthage jail. Despite facing certain death and persecution, the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Brigham Young, traveled west with the Mormon pioneers and successfully relocated church headquarters to the Salt Lake Valley in 1847. After sending missionaries to Europe to recruit members to the church, hundreds of new followers became eager to travel to America. Despite abandoning settlements in Missouri and Illinois, Brigham Young and the Latter-day Saints never gave up. Years later, refuge and safety were both available to all Mormon pioneers in America and overseas. The following journal entries detail the travels of Mormon pioneer Ole Andreas Larson as he immigrated with his wife and family from Norway to America during the end of the Civil War. Whew. I fucking talk too much, goddamn. Okay, Sunday, March 19th, 1865, Risør, Norway. or Reezer, I don't fucking know. I remember my first spiritual awakening. In 1861, a great fire consumed houses and buildings in my hometown of Risør, Norway. Staring into those flames awoke different sensibilities in me that were not present before. Experienced carpenters such as myself were called to stop our current projects and take up our tools to rebuild the city. As I rebuilt Risør, I felt an intense sense of purpose. I better understood myself and my relationship with God through my talents. The state religion of Norway has always been the subject of public criticism. Norwegians remember well the efforts of Hans Hage, a visionary like Martin Luther, who sought to find their own rediscovered faith. Seeing the resilience of Norwegian carpenters coming together was an event that inspired a new love not only for God, but for my carpentry. 2 years after the fire, my wife Ingeborg and I watched our firstborn son, Andrew, then only 19 years old, sail off by himself to the American Salt Lake Valley in April of 1863. Andrew was so inspired by the Mormon faith and the warfare that has been going on in America that he felt it was a holy mission to seek refuge at the new settlement in Utah. For Ingeborg and myself, the Civil War in America made the journey too dangerous. But for Andrew and other Latter-day Saints, the Civil War was a rallying call for justice that provided an outer feeling of holy incivility, holy invincibility. Inspired by Andrew's determination, Ingeborg and I were soon baptized into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints after his departure. Finding a renewed love for our faith, we became more understanding of why Andrew risked his life to be with other Latter-day Saints, and we have not looked back on our decisions since. Olafsson. Good Friday, April 14th, 1865, Risør, Norway. And this is the day when Lincoln gets shot. Took a walk by the shipping docks this morning. I spoke with a Scottish fisherman named Adam. While in the United Kingdom recently, Adam recalled overhearing Royal Navy officers conversing about the Civil War in America. It seems formal warfare will end soon. I talked to Ingeborg about my conversation with Adam. She seems willing. We both see the opportunity. After looking at transportation services, Ingeborg and I have decided to sail to America. Our ship leaves Friday, April 21st for the port of Quebec. Andrew, I will see you soon. Olafsson. Wednesday, April 26th, 1865, somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. I am aboard the Tenero ship with my family and other Norwegians from Risør and Krigero. Rain is all under the deck of the ship. Our priorities on board include washing often to avoid illness and meeting for worship. Captain Thorvaldsen enjoys our children's curiosity. My daughters Ellen and Georgine were allowed to steer the ship while in calm waters upon departure. Vina, Tamina, and Martha all take turns using a spyglass to locate constellations at night. My sons Martin and John play catch with the sailors and farmers on board. Ole and Bent spend their afternoons looking for pirate ships. We should arrive at the port of Quebec by June 2nd. From Quebec, we will sail to New York and then ride by railway to meet with Brother Johnson and his family in Chicago, Illinois. Brother Johnson is another Latter-day Saint from Risør. His family will provide us with transportation and lodging once we arrive. We are grateful for the Johnson family and their repeated hospitality. Olafsson. By the way, I want to say factual that there was an actual Brother Johnson, but his name was Andrew Johnson. But I just thought it was confusing to have two Andrew Johnsons going on. But it is kind of funny how you come to America and it's like you have President Andrew Johnson and like helper Brother Johnson. Kind of cool. Saturday, June 3rd, 1865, on the St. Lawrence River. The Larson family survived crossing the Atlantic. Ingeborg and the children are elated and in great spirits. Having transferred to a new ship in Quebec, today we are currently on a steamboat approaching Buffalo, New York. I can't wait to finally see America. The sunset over the St. Lawrence River invites serenity and mystery. Though the Civil War may be over, we were informed that former U.S. President Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, shot in the back of the head. The nation mourns. Vice President Andrew Johnson has been sworn in as the new President of the United States. Whether or not this is good news for my fellow Latter-day Saints remains unknown. I pray that these events are not bad omens for my friends or my family. Old Larson. Tuesday, Independence Day, July 4th, 1865, Chicago, Illinois. We are settled in Chicago. Today is the first Independence Day since the Confederate surrender. Brother Johnson has taken the boys to purchase leather lemon peel balls to play baseball with the other Latter-day Saints. Ole and Bent dream of starting their own baseball league in Utah. I hope to make their dreams come true. O. Larson. Friday, November 10th, 1865, Chicago, Illinois. News tells us of skirmishes between Indian tribes native to the Great Basin and westbound Latter-day Saints settling into the Salt Lake Valley. Brigham Young and the Mormon pioneers from Nauvoo, upon their arrival to the Utah Valley Territory, distanced themselves from the U.S. federal government and created the state of Deseret? Probably Deseret. Deseret meaning beehive. Mormons stay together and know that they are stronger when there is unity and cohesion. I do not wish to pick up a rifle, but I will do what I must to protect my fellow Latter-day Saints. As Brother Johnson once said, if a man chooses to fight against just one bee, then he must prepare himself to confront the entire hive. Old Larson. Tuesday, January 9th, 1866, Chicago, Illinois. The rapid rate of industrialization in Chicago has been terrifying to witness. One only needs to see the unparalleled power and speed of the organized slaughter and transportation of cattle brought on by the Union Stockyard and Transit Company. Animals were not meant to undergo the horrors of man like this. I do not wish to stay in this city for long. Old Larson. May 11th, 1866. I don't know what day it is, but I should probably know that. Chicago, Illinois. Cholera and yellow fever cases continue to multiply in New Orleans and other Mississippi Delta towns. There are also reports of German and Irish citizens waging violence against the families of Freeman troops stationed in Memphis. A recent massacre occurred in Memphis just days ago. Brother Johnson tells me that undertakers in Memphis, Tennessee are calling for carpenters to help build coffins for their dead yet put to rest. Without thinking, I accepted the call to help. Despite Ingborg's worries about health and safety, accommodations have already been made to sail by steamboat to Memphis. Old Larson. Thursday, August 2nd, 1866, Memphis, Tennessee. Even before the Civil War began, Memphis has struggled with low public health standards. Ingborg tells me that Irish immigrants remain impoverished and unable to find clean housing, and the blank. There we go. Now, due to the large presence of unburied dead, coffin manufacturers have become manufacturers, that's what that's supposed to be, have become a necessity. Before now, I had built one coffin back in Norway in September of 1849. It was for my son, George. He passed away unexpectedly as an infant. Losing a child is one of life's unavoidable shocks. A man changes when he buries his young. I pray now for the health of my family. Old Larson. Tuesday, September 25th, 1866, Memphis, Tennessee. Tragedy. Ellen and Georgine have passed on to be in the spirit world. Aline was 8 years old. Georgine only 15. Ingborg is locked in the bedroom, inconsolable. We are unsure as to the cause of death. Doctors say it could either be the dreaded yellow fever or cholera. I'm unsure if I will build the coffins for my daughters. I do not know what to do. I feel that the longer I stay in this city, the less I feel at home in this country. For the first time in a long time, I am lost. Old Larson. Monday, Julafton, Christmas Eve, December 24th, 1866, Memphis, Tennessee. Workers have been sent home to spend time with loved ones now that most bodies have found their resting caskets for the winter. This is my first Christmas Eve without Aline or Georgine. Ole and Martin are outside playing with their gifted hickory bats. Ingborg is in the kitchen with the other children making cheese-covered risgrot, funeral potatoes, lefse, and hasty pudding. After our meal, the family will sing hymns and open more presents before bed. Olarsson. Saturday, February 2nd, 1867, Memphis, Tennessee. 24 years of marriage to Ingborg. Blistering winds and ice canceled our evening plans. The entire household is huddled around the fireplace. The children share stories about the secret lives of winter foxes and hibernating bears. Ingborg reminisces about the early days of our relationship frolicking in Norwegian snow. I remember we used to practice our English by reciting John Lyon sonnets to one another. Time moves quickly. Cherish everyone while you can. Olarsson. Wednesday, May 15th, 1867, Memphis, Tennessee. Break time at work. Yesterday, I decided to have lunch with my fellow carpenters and undertakers. One of my coworkers, Valentine, spoke about his rebel relatives who served in the Civil War and fought against the Union. Many of them had hopes to run for office so that they could influence the economy in their favor, but the ironclad oath policies kept them from holding any federal positions. Valentine says that sometimes the ex-Confederate boys will meet up in a fraternal fashion at Ku Klux dens. What goes on in those meetings, Valentine said, will most likely never be recorded on paper. Today, I am having lunch in an unfinished iron casket. I can't help but let my mind drift and my fingers ponder. Iron caskets are being used at some warehouses as a final resting place to store the dead. How does a tomb differ from a factory? I remember when I first came to Memphis, I saw dead Union soldiers being put into caskets to be transported up north. Most days, I am curious about the bodies that will be put into the coffins that I construct. Will my coffins last forever? Will wood and iron keep a soul at rest over time? Who will build my coffin? Olarsson. Sunday, September 29th, 1867, Memphis, Tennessee. Today is my 59th birthday. The children went by wagon to purchase eggs, flour, milk, and sugar from the store so that Ingborg could bake a traditional blot cake. Ingborg likes using milk to keep the baked sponge cake wet while also coating layers of the cake with a sweetened whipped cream. I don't know how, but I think Ingborg will have a berry jam to put on top of the blot cake. I am thankful for God's tender mercies. Olarsson. Wednesday, October 9th, 1867, Memphis, Tennessee. I pray that my time in Memphis will come to an end soon. Ingborg and I both agree we must reunite with our boy Andrew in Fountain Green, Utah. There, I can build a new community for future Latter-day Saints and live comfortably until the end of my days. Olarsson. Mormon pioneer Ole Andreas Larson fell ill and died building coffins for cholera and yellow fever victims in Memphis on Tuesday, October 22nd, 1867. The cause of death listed for Larson was written down as diarrhea, leaving open the possibility of whether he succumbed to cholera or yellow fever. Ole and his daughters, Eileen and Georgine, are all buried at Elmwood Cemetery. Fortunately, Ingborg and the other children continued west and did eventually make it to Fountain Green, Utah, with help from the Johnson family. And then that's a bunch of citations and shit. So yeah, I'm really proud of that story. Like I found new info for this guy and put it in his folder, and I just want that to like, I don't know, either be a chapbook or like exist on its own, or I don't know. It would have been nice if it had won me $1,000, but maybe next time. This last piece, I'm trying to write the next sequel thing, whatever, for Summer of Gooch, for which is like my pinball writing. So this is like a light meditation on pinball, kind of ish. This is just a random departure from the theme tonight, but I decided fuck it. This is called this piece doesn't really have a title, but the title I went with for this part is Soft Plunge. Walking up to the machine. That's the first step. Hearing the coins in your pocket, you see yourself in the reflection of the back glass. You look down the line and see other people playing. You want them to hear you playing the machine. You see the score of the person before you. I can beat that. Start the amazing race. Shuffle your pockets and fling silver into the coin mech. Seeing people walk up to a pinball machine is funny. Some of them don't know where the start button is. Others will hear the knock after a game is over and won't see that they've won a free game. Older machines will make you manually load the ball into the ball trough. The way the ball sits there ready, like a soldier in the sky waiting for the green lit drop zone. The plunge is unique only once. You can plunge without looking, or you can plunge with strategy. Some machines have custom plunge knobs, or they got rid of the plunger itself altogether. The Halloween machine offers a knife handle as a plunge. Fishtails offers a push-button fishing reel to plunge the ball into play. The downside being no special plunges, which means you have to move the machine to your advantage. That's not how you spell lethal. There we go. Lethal Weapon 3 uses the end handle and firing trigger of a gun for the ball plunger. The skill shot is shooting the correct firing range target on a 4-bank by the left orbit lane. Also, sending the ball through the orbit lane loads an Uzi on the playfield, where you will qualify to shoot a dot matrix bad guy using the plunge trigger. Dirty Harry and Indiana Jones both also have gun handles for their ball plungers. Using the small lines in the machine to measure how hard you want to bounce the ball into play is a great way to start the game with control. You can plunge just enough to spot a shot at the top of the playfield, or you can plunge ever so softly that the ball goes into a saucer or comes safely to the flippers. When you're able to trap up and secure the ball to the flipper that you want, that's when you can really do some damage. Weekend Warehouse BYOB, Pinball Machine Restoration Get Together. You walk up to the Ali machine, Stern, 1980. You want to be like Ali, the greatest. You're spelling out greatest on the playfield so you can rack up end of ball bonus points. To begin, you have to plunge the ball into the match. The rubbers feel like boxing ring ropes. The Ali saucer bank up top decides the first anticipation. Ball kicks out, popping around the loud, rapid bumpers. The ball hits the left bank of drop targets, sending 2 down. The ball settles on the right flipper. Button mash sends it into the bonus multiplier drop targets at the top left of the playfield. Electromechanical sounds of a boxing bell. You trap the ball on the left flipper after it bounces from the yellow ERG targets on the right side of the playfield. Letting go of the ball and watching it roll. Precision press. Uppercut successful. The ball sits on the saucer and the count-up sound rolls again. God bless the Stern SB300 sound card. The middle of nowhere, Tennessee, inside an arcade, kids and parents at a Dance Dance Revolution tournament. The movement of feet, shuffle combos in sync with Extreme, Star Junk 95, Naoki, Smile DK, Captain Jack, Erotic, Desire, Revenge, Fix X, all remixed. The fluidity of the modern isolationist, the performance of dedication to performance, enhanced with pulsations. Let's get toasty. Just stick to the steps, stick to the art around you, and remove the roof on top of you. Bring down the entire building like it's 1992, no format. Let's pull out the floor mat of the dance stage, right foot forward and back. Grab the handlebar and let your torso move. Get your feet up off the ground. Hear every single beat, groove to every sound like you're trying to escape from the only thing you can do, escape. Staring down at your opponent, some has-been. He probably lives in an overpriced apartment complex by the highway exit near the park. I bet he has a small dog. There's no screen, just a slight haze of cigar smoke from the children's birthday room nearby. But you're the champ around these parts, the real deal. I'm Charlie fucking Brown in the arcade. It's full, it's Friday, the kids are bowling and throwing skee balls up H ramps to try and land them into a scoring tubes. Dua Lipa plays on the loudspeaker. It smells like cheese, pizza, and stressed adults, and someone has definitely gotten into a fight into the parking lot outside, but they help with keeping the arcade in business, so they get to stay. You grab your mallet, it fits into your palm smoothly. Your air hockey table hums and hisses, keeping the arcade cabinet noises blocked out. You play around with the puck on your side of the line. Teasing is something that should be taught in school, but instead I have to show this grown-up splinter smoker how it's done. I fake like I'm going to do some fancy casting shit, but I fling a straight shot into his goal. The puck slides down into the return bin, and my opponent closes his eyes. And that's it.
Man, Colton, as usual, I really dig this stuff. I love one thing about both of these pieces that I really love is the like anthropological level of detail here. Like the pinball piece is so fascinating because the first half of it is first of all, let me just say that I'm a sucker for YouTube videos about shit like this that get really granular. You know, like that will like take some retro game apart on like the coding level and explain why something does something or what or you know how like some mechanic in a video game works or something. And I love what you're doing here because that first half, like you take such a precise and detailed look at all of these different machines. And like what makes them unique and what makes them like fascinating, like almost on like as a work of art, as a work of like functional art or promotional art, and how the different triggers are shaped, that stuff is fucking fascinating. And then what I love about the second half is it has that same deep level of detail, but it functions differently. It's almost as if the camera starts inside the fucking machine, right? And you're seeing the machine like move and work. You're watching the ball bounce off the triggers, and you get like such a precisely detailed sense of what it would be to be like inside the pinball machine. And then it's like the camera pulls back and get the same sense as far as the arcade is concerned. Like you get a sense of the like sights and sounds and sensory details of being in this fucking arcade in the middle of the pinball tournament. And then it pulls back another step and you're like inside the inside the participant's head, inside the player's head, right? And you get a sense of their psychology and how they're thinking about the game and how they're approaching the game and how like they're trash talking their opponents like within themselves. And it's just such a fast you like it's like it's like a vivisection. It's like a vivisection of a pinball tournament in this fascinating fucking way where you can see all the different components like in motion on a like on like the level of an autopsy on like on an almost like sick and scientific level. And I love that. Now the Larson piece I'm going to say less about just because you've read it before and I talked about it before, but I do like the way that you've continued to flesh that piece out. Like and you've really leaned into what was like so effective about that piece initially, which was the like once again that like granular level of historical detail. I see you slip in the thing about the KKK too, and you
You never know. I mean, like that's the
I
cool thing
believe
about
it. I
historical fiction.
believe it,
Like,
right? At that historical moment. So you're getting more not in only into like the kind of persecution that Mormons faced, right? And their uniquely kind of fraught position in that historical moment, but also at like these other little anthropological facets of American and then also Southern
right.
history at that
It's
point.
like, I mean, like if you're a Mormon, you're like, okay, I'm a Mormon, but like, at least I'm not like an ex-Confederate soldier, you know, because
Yeah,
like you got no fucking chance at like, you know, being established. Like you're pretty much like you went from like up here, you dropped, and like almost in certain cases, like Mormons were doing better than you, and you're like, what the fuck, dude? Like,
and
it's
it's kind of funny to hear that section read now, right? Because those same laws are have made a resurgence in public relevance, and you know, with all the like with the
Yeah.
current presidential campaign.
Question to Colton.
yes.
Do you like James Elroy?
I haven't read James Elroy.
Oh shit, because you love him.
Send me
As
some stuff in
far
the
as
chat.
like the thematic content of that poem, with uh Elroy, I left and then I went and grabbed my Elroy novels.
Damn.
Um, the second one, the first one's American Tabloid. That's about the assassination of JFK, but the second one is about the assassination of sorry, Martin Luther King by Mormons.
Wait, what?
Collusion between the Mormons, the FBI, and the CIA.
What?
And
What?
Yeah,
Howard Hughes.
it's
No, I gotta
I don't think it's
now.
true.
Oh man, I want to write a sequel now.
It's a conspiracy theory, but it's like a fun one.
That's fun. Like that's okay. That I'm checking that shit out. It's James
Yeah,
L.
dude. He fucking rules. James Elroy. Dude, yeah. You'd love him.
Okay, I'm typing that chat. That's amazing. I mean that's like just right there, just like the craziness of history. Because like there's so many like maybe Larson never experienced the KKK, but like people were talking. They're like, you guys hear about this Ku Klux group? You're like, yeah, they're like a bunch of like pissed off ex-Confederates that go out drinking and wear masks and
No, that shit started in like Ohio.
right, like which is just nuts, like. But the like Tennessee had like deep, roots for the KKK as well, and I just love just thinking like I don't know, there's like with all of the historical events happening that Larson is like this Norwegian like Forrest Gump, where he experiences everything. Like he's an immigrant, he's a fucking father, he's got like a crazy wife, but like she's also a great cook, and like his kids are gonna be baseball prodigies, and like he sees war and a plague and KKK, and like he dies. It's almost like I wanted to do uh Forrest Gump, but like a tragedy, kind of, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah, there we go. That's how I'm gonna pitch that to whoever I pitch that story to. But William, I appreciate your
great
comments
job,
about.
man.
Yeah,
Thank you. I
no,
appreciate your comments and to answer Mullane. Yes, there was a lot of field study about the arcade. Like I would just sit back, just in an arcade, and I would just observe and watch. And like I loved going to arcade as a kid at like bowling alleys. And there's just something about like adults in an arcade taking pinball tournaments seriously. And there's also competitive foosball. There's also competitive Dance Dance Revolution, and there are tournaments in Smyrna, Tennessee. But just seeing, just like the mentality of people giving it their all, and like the impressiveness of like arcade skill sets, but like in adults, and you're like, okay, this person's really good at this because they like got beat as a kid, or like because maybe on their side they're like a drug addict, or it's just I don't know. You can like David Foster Wallace analyze every person in an arcade and be the most beautiful story ever. So.
that's what I do every week at Misery Loves Company. No, but Colton, I do want to say just quickly on the Forrest Gump thing. One thing I appreciate about the Larson piece is how understated it is in the way that it handles that, right? Like you can see the correlation with all these historical events. You can feel them kind of subtly happening in the background, but it's
Yeah.
not foregrounded the way it is in Forrest Gump, where everything has this like sense of saccharine irony to it or whatever. So I think you handled that element really well.
Thank
And
you.
yeah.
Also, while we're live, I was pondering this the other day. I don't know how sober I was, but I had this thought of like, imagine being in Vietnam and you're like on the Vietnamese side and you're like just waiting there, and then Forrest fucking Gump comes up in front of you and says, I'm sorry, Mr. Gook, but I gotta shoot you. Could you imagine? I believe that there's a scene cut from the movie that has that, and I'm gonna fight to find it. I just know it exists. Sorry, I just had to that
Hey, man, we're only about, I don't know, maybe 18 months from you being able to create that scene on demand with AI.
I want to do it. I want to do a sequel to Forrest Gump from the perspective of Vietnam, showing what a war monster Forrest Gump really was.
All right. All right. Thank you, Colton. That was
Thank
fantastic.
you.
And Mark is up next. Hey, Mark, how's it going? Well, you might be having mic issues. I'm not sure. I couldn't. Can anyone hear Mark? Mark, can you hear me? Maybe put it in the chat if you can. Hmm. And And everyone can still hear me, right? I haven't frozen up. Okay. Oh, well, Mark, here, I'll give you a chance to fiddle around with it if you want. Maybe we'll go to the next person and then we'll circle back to you and see if you might, it's possible you could have it set to the wrong mic or something. Sometimes if you have multiple devices, Zoom will get confused about which one it wants to use. So anyway, we'll circle back to you, Mark. So in that case, Jan warged into Rudy, I believe, is up next. Rudy, are you prepared to get warged into yet again? This has become a weekly thing. I hope it doesn't do like permanent brain damage in some way.
I'm sure the Ritalин's already done more damage.
Fair enough. Among other things, right?
Yeah. So this is a piece by Jan that's in progress. I believe it's called Riding the White Horse. I'm going to read a section of it. Jan just told me to read an excerpt, but I choose. So I'm gonna start in like the middle here and read some stuff with cool roleplay or shit that I thought was really, really fucking cool. So this is Jan Stanek's White Horse. There were tapeworms in the body of the Grawl Republic, which sank 0.6 centimeters deeper into the sea with every passing decade. Built heavy out of red brick and granite, buildings were imagined as teeth, some rotting and infected. Public health hazards cracked down the middle, signaling nerves. Railways and motorways being bones, and going by the complaints of Onkelos, a dear friend, cancerous. Her streets were a winding nervous system that wound up and down 10,000 hills and plateaus that he thought of as breasts. The view up here was not at all that bad on clear, bright days, like this is in April, and outside was the first bird he had seen. He realized in 5 months, a cardinal. All the birds were disappearing from the sky. On the choked balcony strewn with broken chairs and garlanded with drying laundry, a cardinal was perched on the clothesline between one of his shirts and Madge's underwear, bright and on the feed house that his father had carved years and years ago, a hidden fondness for cardinals, specifically one he could only recall when they were right in front of him. This is my favorite bird, he thought, straightening his tie. Other birds, skuas, gulls, pigeons, crows, even blue jays, were given as much attention as cracks in the sidewalk, only of note if they were a bother to him, and really nothing ever was. The Lord was ambushed and quartered outside of the city of Elam, and his corpse left to carrion birds. Afterwards, his bones were spread among 49 tribes. In this city, there was the tibia, brought out of the lazaretto by the Lord when they migrated here. Nearby in Red Ditch Township, the carcass had spinal segments C3 through C7. In 15 Pines on Deplembro Street was a park. Thickets of birch trees along a gravel road that branched off to the colonial cemetery, the headstones illegible, then a public bathroom, and in the trees sometimes. The sewer system of the city were entrails, and each public bathroom a rectum. His schedule on Saturdays his schedules on Saturdays were wonderfully freeform, and he'd have to come up with an alibi. He could visit Yosef if Hadley phoned him to ask where he was. Then Yosef could, yes, say he'd just been there. And then where would he be? Orifice. He leaned over the concrete balustrade, or balustrade, I'm not sure what that is, and spat down onto the street. His ears ringing, watching it fall out of sight, and then standing straight. By scent, a petrochemical plant 5 kilometers up the coast, and sight, he could scarcely make out the suburbs and water towers of Red Ditch, Mansardian roofs rising shyly above close-packed and planned streets lined with blue pines. Not a beach view, but a good view, good enough to pay rent for. The hexagonal steeples built by St. Winifred of Vif- Vifden stood nearly as high around the main building of the Cathedral of Our Lady of Sorrows. He remembered a bird he had seen, a cardinal, perched on a snow-sagged black bough years and years ago. The vaudeville theater on Hurwitz would be closed by the end of the week after a near decade of meeting his needs, and today he would have to go to the park on Dippenbrow, something that excited and disgusted him, and he pictured himself there, and the cold, stained porcelain of the sinks and toilets, the stained floor, and he felt that he had every right to go there. He yawned and went inside to the kitchen and sat down at the table next to Hadley, who had been waiting for him to come back and start eating. Not one of them had any obligations on Saturday. He was always sure to go out on the weekends for the director of music. Across from him, next to Maja and Mother, his father read the newspaper, only the dome of his bald head visible, something that struck him as obscene, and he ate slowly, not having much of an appetite. None of them were talkative in the morning, and oftentimes the only sound at breakfast was his father's remarks on the latest news. Less birds this spring than last year. He turned the page and mumbled almost none, really. Mother said that it was strange and that she had noticed that the feed house had been full since March. She blamed airplanes and declared that she would never make use of one, then asked what day it was. Why bother asking when you don't work? Maja pulled her feet off the floor and pressed her knees against her chest and gestured to him that her feet were cold, and he pointed to her bedroom. Without work, time doesn't really mean anything. The only noise he could hear were their forks scraping against ceramic, and then a page turning. Then through the open sliding door came the noise of a ship's horn from a long ways away down the white shoreline. He had tuned out all of the sounds that came with this address years ago, but for a moment he stopped eating and wondered what it would have been like if he had joined the merchant marine as a young man, and he saw himself only a little happier. He exhaled and started eating again. The neighbors next door were Zionists, and through the thin walls let in by the silence he could hear them talking, and he could hear music playing. It was Goodbye Odessa. He got up angry and beat against the wall, not shouting, only pounding his fist against it. The music quieted, and he could hear a chair scrape against the same dirty green linoleum he had in his kitchen. And through the wall, Herman shouted at him, muffled, to stop all that racket. Only stop if you stop first, Briar. We're trying to eat. Don't make me come over there, Majewski, he pulled out. This is the last time for you. The last time. Again, I'll make you regret it. My only regret is that I have you for a neighbor, Briar, you louse. Nita Briar. All you are and ever will be. You should be ashamed of yourself, you bastard, shouting at me like that. My kids might hear you. You son of a bitch. On his ceiling, he noticed with a rising level of offense someone was pounding a broom against their floor. I'll say whatever I want. Come out to your balcony and I'll say something to you. Bah, just go away, Franz. We're eating. And so were we. Well, what do you want? For us to sit here in total silence? All I'm asking for is a little peace and quiet, Briar. Oh, just go away. Sit back down. Will you or won't you quiet down? I'll quiet down if you just sit back down, for God's sake. It's too early for me to be arguing with you about this. And for what? To do it again 2 weeks later? Go sit back down. He sat back down, face hot, and in his right ear he could hear the blood pumping through his veins from the heart, a gap in all sound. Then he said, "I'm feeling agitated today." Hadley stared at him, and then her lips drew thin across her face, and she said, "Yes, yes, you are." All the refuse of the world gets thrown here, he thought, feeling bitter and wishing he had never come here. 10,000 tribes devoured by this horrible country. He swallowed eggs and set his forks down and ran a hand across his head. Only in this country would I have to be neighbors with a Jew as unrefined and utterly tasteless as Breyer. The Breyers think they're better than any of us because they're from Berlin. And he said it out loud, quiet under Goodbye Odessa, which he could hear still, something that annoyed him to no end, and he thought about screaming in Breyer's face that he was the human equivalent of a hangnail, a piece of refuse, then took a hateful comfort in the fact that his family had converted out nigh 130 years ago and kept their faith a secret from others. If Breyer knew what he did, he would shit. The Messiah was not subtle, but was kept away, hidden from the world by the true God, as he had been each time the wheel turned. Publicly, they were Roman Catholic. He could picture Breyer shaking in fear and shame, muttering, "Schande, Schande." The sight of Hadley in her bedclothes giving him a passing excitement. 10,000 hills and plateaus like breasts, pale in dim morning sunlight under a clear sky. It baffled him that she had said yes, but he knew better than to complain or do more than count his blessings. She excited him like a painting did. His admiring was purely aesthetic, an appreciation of what this world could create out of sperm, if only given 9 months. It passed, and he thought about what he should do later in the day. That is Mr. Jan Stanek with
So first of all, Rudy, thank
White
you
Horse.
once again for making the sacrifice, for lending your body and your mind to Jan's service. I'm sure it's incredibly grueling. Um,
Oh yeah, my body is ready.
so anyway, Jan, this is beautifully written. This is a really wonderful piece of writing. I love the atmosphere of this world you've created. I love how it's simultaneously like half medieval and half modern. Like you have clearly modern details here, but you also have things like the like references to medieval relics, right? Like the body that's dismembered and the pieces of it are distributed to different towns as sort of like as like religious relics, right? And I love the way that you like describe this landscape, this city, the way that you make it seem like a living human body or at least like a human corpse, right? And it's so wonderfully morbid and it's so there's like a real like gorgeous ugliness to the entirety of this piece, the way people are described, the way people behave, the like the crassness of human behavior and the way that like the characters reduce the narrator anyway like reduces other characters basically to ethnic stereotypes, the kind of like lurking toxic energy of the American state of mind is so present in this piece and in the landscape. And I love the inclusion of the cardinal as this kind of like recurring palate cleanser, this reminder that like maybe beauty exists somewhere outside of the reach of this vicious, ugly little world, right? Anyway, it's a great piece, Jad. I appreciate it, and thank you, Rudy, for lending your your services once again. Um, Jad, I'm not. I won't read that, Jad. I won't read that. I guess just in case you don't want it on the record. Anyway, Mark, how's it going? Have you had any luck with your mic?
Well, I tried. Can you
Yes.
hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. First of all, I enjoyed hearing the work that was read tonight. A lot of it. One of the greatest joys of not being a teacher anymore is I don't have to comment on things that I hear or read, and so I've been relishing that privilege tonight of just being able to be totally passive and kind of do the audience equivalent of a starfish. But I've enjoyed it immensely. I'm going to read 2 poems tonight. They're longish poems, and I'll put the link in the chat box. You can find them here if you want to, but I wouldn't recommend it. I tend to just enjoy sitting back and listening. They were published on A Thin Slice of Anxiety. These 2 poems, in some ways, are about my family and my childhood. The first poem is Requiem for the Duke of Paducah. My parents were millionaires when having $1 million meant something. My parents were penniless, beaten and broken under crushing debt. My parents were entrepreneurs when being an entrepreneur didn't mean being a capitalist, because everybody was a capitalist. My parents were white trash, cracker, tornado bait. My parents were iconoclasts who taught their children to kneel down before no man. My parents were social climbers, terrified of giving themselves away, being found out as rustic simpletons. My parents were Green Berets raising an army of flinty-eyed survivors. My parents were tastemakers in God's country, if God hates refinement and taste. My parents were mad scientists who bred their children in test tubes, assembled their spawn from the refuse of charnel houses. My parents couldn't see the forests of their monstrous offspring, for the trees of each child's multitude of shortcomings, every one of which defects needed prompt corrective attention all the time. My parents lived in fear of social embarrassment, were slaves to the opinions of their peers, who were all millionaire anarchists. My father dressed my mother in furs after 20 years of working her to the bone. He browbeat her in front of the children. He put her on a pedestal. He used a belt on us if we disrespected her. My father just wanted a little love from his wife, who was frigid and wouldn't let him touch her. My mother henpecked my father, kicked him out of their marital bed because she couldn't stand his curling yellow toenails, overgrown like vulture talons. My parents lived in separate parts of the house. My parents still loved each other after 30 years, but divorced because their monstrous offspring reminded them too much of their youthful hubris, their mistaken belief that they could do it all alone. Knew better than the so-called experts in the fields of child rearing and education, especially education, public schools by that point, well down the path of social engineering, elements of political correctness, multiculturalism having irrevocably crept in, according to my parents, not to mention busing. What a nightmare my parents and their well-heeled friends lamented. My parents were primitives, wore homunculi around their necks and glass reliquaries. My parents cut the ears off their enemies, who were legion in the small town where we lived. My parents gambled on riverboats. My father carried a Derringer and wore a pocket watch. My mother spoke the Queen's English and wondered why her children couldn't be more like the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, lamented the fact that her husband was a brute, a primitive. My parents survived being struck by the same lightning they used to bring cadavers to life in the attic before naming them. My parents buried bodies around their swimming pool. My parents voted for Reagan. My mother lied to her children about how she voted in '84. My mother lied to her children about everything. My mother had a healthy relationship with her children. My parents didn't trust the government. My parents worked for the CIA, but didn't lie to their children about this. My parents believed knowing was fun. My parents bred high maintenance pedigreed show dogs that had breathing problems and were incontinent everywhere in the tastefully appointed upper middle class West End house my father bought my mother 2 miles from the flood wall along the river, in which my mother devoted herself to decorating in an ivory and gold color scheme with Far East accents provided by Chinese trunks, silk screens, pottery, and jade from pre-revolutionary China, sent to her by her aunt, a grande dame who, when the phrase still meant something, who married a man there before the war and then escaped with him to the Philippines, where they became hoteliers. The Philippines also ending up occupied, the aunt and her husband interred, but it doesn't matter. My mother's certain her son will get around to liberating the islands sooner or later and single-handedly revive a once vital trade relationship for the importing of coconut oil, a victim of the trade embargo and the post-World War II propaganda about bad saturated fat and good unsaturated fat. My mother was a bitch, chow and boxer mix that attacked anyone who got too close to me, including my mother and father. My mother never cheated on my father, thus had no sympathy for him, was never satisfied, no matter how successful in business he was, complained because her Buick wasn't a Mercedes. Not even after my father worked his cock off, literally, did she stop complaining. Complained because of what he had sacrificed for his job, which of course wasn't a job, was a small business, which of course demanded sacrifice from everyone, just like the Vietnamese family that owned the only Chinese restaurant in town, and just like the Vietnamese family, my parents were refugees from the war-torn country of West Virginia, who reinvented themselves as moneyed sophisticates in a barge town. My parents crossed the Ohio River at night in rafts to sneak into Illinois and smuggle cigarettes across the border. My parents were militaristic. My parents were anarchists. My parents were militant in their hatred of following orders and in their contempt and disdain for those who did follow orders, obeyed without question, except for their children, who were expected to obey and revere their parents with fervent, unquestioning obedience, except for the times when my parents wanted to see a little grit, a little sand in their children's character, a little character in their character, even if it was bad character. My father liked McEnroe and Connors. My mother liked Borg. But for the times when he didn't travel with his parents so they could watch him play like Connors did, which was every time Borg played until the last two tournaments before he retired, which he lost, finally coming back down to earth. My mother pretended like she didn't see Connor's overbearing mother who raised her son for one thing only, and that was for her to live through, like my mother, who was like every mother with her son, living vicariously through him to the endless private mirth and amusement of my father, who liked watching Connor's play on Sunday morning on TV in the living room, if only to rub my mother's nose in it, in his understanding of her warped and unhealthy relationship with her son, the two of who he suspected had more than just an emotionally incestuous bond, but physically as well. Bud Collins, cheerfully oblivious and chirping about what was then, in those pre-Oprah days, not looked upon with the same emotionally evolved disgust such a domineering mother and son relationship would now engender. My parents taught their children to respect the God in every man. My parents taught their children to look down on no man, no matter how humble. And if there were no God in man, then so much the worse for him. Hopefully, he had a nice suit. My parents wanted to see fervent histrionics from their children, the better to intimidate their enemies, who would be legion, my parents were sure. My parents criticized their children for having no demonstrable emotions. My parents taught their children to care about someone or something is to be vulnerable to its destruction, and thus to care about no one and nothing save winning in a world where only the weak and ill-formed, plaintive and sniveling survive, if not thrive, if not prosper. My parents lived in caves, under stairs, always in the closet at the end of a dark hall. My parents were nomads, lion tamers, dueled at 20 paces with flintlock pistols. My parents taught their children family is inviolate. Family secrets stayed family secrets. Skeletons in closets stayed in the closets. My parents went to church. My parents laughed at God and man. My parents knew which way the wind blew. Even when they knew better, my parents knew better. There was only one rule in my family. My parents were right. And if they were wrong, see rule number 1. The second poem is titled The Hand of My Father. His face, weather-beaten, lined and creased. My father was a violent, unpredictable man with a voice like a masonry saw cutting sidewalk when he browbeat me, enumerated my faults, shortcomings, and weaknesses, explained how these would be my undoing in a world that wasn't kind to the strong or well-formed, such as myself. After working on the roof of the Goodyear tire plant, particles of vulcanized rubber under the skin of his face, neck, hands, arms, so he looked like a coal miner from the mountains where he was born and never returned. The rubber granules impossible to wash out, but getting expressed slowly, seeping into the blood, filtered out through bladder, colon, sweat glands, tear ducts, hair. My father was a musical prodigy in the mountains of West Virginia, whose sadistic, domineering mother forced him to go to college on a football scholarship because it paid more. A pulling guard, short and quick, he blew out his knee, failed all his classes, and got expelled. Turning his back on education, family, and music, bitter and resentful, he drifted around the country, working odd jobs, seasonal work, in orchards, logging camps, resorts. He did whatever it took. masterless, a lone wolf, beholden to no man, without prospects. He still had flash, a little style, listened to the Kingston Trio, and dressed like Ray Charles. Resurfacing back east, he mopped hot tar on the roofs of hospitals and libraries, prisons and retail stores, manufacturing plants and factories, alongside men who couldn't read or drive a car. Roofer, foreman, superintendent, contractor, bidding on jobs, working his way up to management. From peasant stock, my father broke his back for his lord, that is, whoever paid him. In this case, a man in Pittsburgh named Harry, until buying him out, only to sell the company years later for several $1,000,000. A mathematical savant. In the interim, my father taught himself to program, beginning when Apple kick-started the personal computer revolution, first in BASIC, then DOS, and finally C, coding with the 1989 standard release. Hello, world. He wrote software to run the company, estimate job costs, send out invoices, do the books. He designed a server to host the programs and data, and then viruses to infiltrate and destroy it all. After he sold the company, did all this for enjoyment, for the challenge, the thrill of it. My father was a hacker, a cyber criminal, before there were laws to govern virtual reality. Seated in his cobalt blue velvet wing chair, he'd drink a 2-liter of anything carbonated and sweet after dinner, the law of supply and demand at work in his blood, creating a positive feedback loop of blood sugar highs and lows until his moods were no longer a roller coaster of high-strung irritability and torpor, no longer up and down, just up all the time, way high up, where it was hard to tell if he was even there anymore, behind the living room's fifth wall of permanent hyperglycemia, a diabetic fugue state running binary code, zeros and ones filling the black screen of his mind. My father reaching over himself to pick up a burning roach from the edge of the glass ashtray with his thumb and index finger like alligator clips, bringing the hot stub to his lips, his nails orange and thick and as big as coal shovels, holding in the smoke while he dry spits flakes of tobacco, then mashing out the unfiltered Camel and taking a draw from a solo cup filled with something fluorescent orange or green or yellow, like the day glow weight forward taper fly fishing line he used, the unnatural color, better to see the virtuoso undulations as he cast the line, laying it down like cake piping on the white river, drifting in an inner tube, his pale, waxy, nerve-damaged shins and feet in stocking foot waders, black rubber swim fins creating drag in the meanders, the migration of the river in geologic time, mirroring the waveform of each masterful cast, catching 20-inch browns on quarter-inch hooks, a consummate fly fisherman, peerless and without equal. The same year, a cowboy on a billboard said he'd walk a mile for a Camel cigarette. My father walked 14 miles for a Camel, having parked his car and walked several miles to where he wanted to fish, only to realize he hadn't brought his cigarettes, so walked all the way back. By the time I was old enough to notice his fingers stained bright orange like he'd been eating cheese curls from a can, the creamy jade interior of his El Camino gave me headaches, made me nauseous. The dashboard, steering wheel, armrest, glove compartment, stained sepia, dry and gritty during winter, the nicotine tacky during the summer, the windshield hazy. After supper, the blue clouds of smoke hung like sandbars in a wide expanse of the Ohio beneath the rafter, until my mother drove him out of the house like she had driven him out of their bed many years before. He built a fly tying room in the corner of the butter yellow 2-car garage that never saw a car in the years we lived there, hung sections of drywall, bright heads of electro galvanized steel nails winking in the dimness at the back of the garage behind the chest freezer, the room tidy but cramped, a bullet shaped vise fastened to the edge of a small desk, the nose cleft with a dark seam and ringed with a knurled collar to tighten, a magnifying glass fastened with a C-clamp on an adjacent side, its lens as thick as his favorite ashtray. The metal joints of the arms like the bony struts of a prehistoric bird's wings, ready to fold up or spread out. Stacked on a long table and underneath, cardboard filing boxes labeled with black felt tip marker and filled with plastic freezer baggies of feathers, sometimes whole wings, the desiccated tendons rough beneath the fluffy down. In this room, like his herringbone velour wing chair, like the black command prompt screen and C programming language, like his after dinner diabetic fugue state, like drifting in his inner tube and milk chocolate brown waders on the white river's meanders, his pale, waxy, nerve damaged legs tingly, as effervescent as 4th of July sparklers below his knees. In all these places, my father was a king. Only whores truly understood my father, the cold, shriveled flesh of manhood, useless between his legs. Blood vessels collapsed after years of sugar rushing through his veins. My father was profligate, sired 1,000 illegitimate offspring, all of who laid claim to my father's kingdom, tried to supplant my father's only son in his affections, but to no avail. My father doted on my mother, an aristocrat, a prude looking over her reading glasses in disbelief when he undressed without turning off the lights, because he was a rustic, a simpleton, because she knew he could just as easily have a plastic spoon in his mouth and a shit-eating grin, talking about full shares and eating pussy on board a container ship, or be the jaded and bearded, thus melancholy, captain of the same container ship, harshly demanding, "Got that? Got that?" rhetorically of his subordinates seated around the table in the mess area, his angry questions like the squawks of a metallic bird of prey circling high above in blue cloudless sky, stark cries of outrage over some imagined slight to his infinitely practical and democratic point of view, still echoing within the canyon walls of my present desolation. Every time my mother looked at my father, she knew my father could just as easily be holding her, if not her entire family, hostage while her feckless husband went to withdraw the ransom. My father, in the end, not raping my mother, his hostage, but consensually sleeping with her only after he confided how hard it was being a brother, how sex is the furthest thing from your mind, but you have to do what you have to do, the burden of expectations, and so on. And my mother, a member of what used to be called the leisure class before the cultural revolution of the 1960s, really felt his pain. And it was tender and real between them until the symbolic world of information and marketing desire and fear, insecurity, and the weight of society's judgment caught up with them, ran them down like the Furies as they tried to escape aboard a stolen transit bus in the desert outside LA, also known as West Kentucky. My father, in his madness, killing her, only so he could resurface back east just to play golf at the country club on weekends until he lost all but a pincer of thumb and forefinger on his right hand because of squamous cell carcinoma. He hated doctors too much to let one look at and diagnose the raisin head of tumor, black and iridescent, like an eruption at the summit of inflamed rosy skin on top of the knuckle connecting pinky to fist, finally falling out in the shower. The small crater it left continuing to leak and drool, but without any pain, so he just covered it with gauze and thin strips of surgical tape, thought about the 2 remaining digits he could still feel and use the rest of his fingers like ripe fruit ready to drop, a nicotine orange stained nipper, all that was left at the end of an arm shriveled like the branch of a tree suffering root rot after the chemo got done with it, a tourniquet at his shoulder protecting his other more vital organs, the bones of his forearm, radius and ulna, like the metal struts of his magnifying glass, meatless and visible under skin like wet tissue, the crab-like claw held in his good left hand, cradled like something delicate, precious, the fragility of which shamed, embarrassed him, embarrassed by all of it he in fact was, the whole thing that led up to the grotesque caricature at the end of his scrawny, freckled arm, the arm itself no longer the arm of a man of direct and unequivocal action, the arm of a man who got on with it, the down of ginger hairs common to someone who burns easily, buoyant and blurring the autumnal palette of freckles, the color of turning leaves, the points of his nicotine stained pinch, holding the crinkly roach of an unfiltered Camel's cigarette in a blue haze of smoke, unruly brown hairs of tobacco spilling out the end, the cigarette paper hot, damp with his spit, worried from the pressure of his drag and squeeze, the Sturm und Drang of his locomotive mind, out of control and taken for granted by him and everyone around him, a given. What's left of my father's hand, what he left in me, like the great movie villains, Hannibal Lecter, cutting off his hand to save himself from the woman he loved, the bondage she promised him, at the same time leaving a chill trace of his hypnotically murderous grip in us, the audience. Darth Vader's mechanical stump, short circuiting and smoking, stray wires spilling out like frays of tobacco from the spit dampened end of one of my father's unfiltered Camels, as we finally understand the dark side of the Force, its binary of master and apprentice, fealty and betrayal. The Terminator's right arm, its powerful network of hydraulic servo mechanism, whining as it tries to free itself of the titanium alloy combat chassis endoskeleton, getting flattened in a machine press, only for the hand to become the relic from the future that sparks the technological revolution that makes humanity's war against the machines inevitable. Nosferatu's long, bony fingers as shadow stealing over the furrows of Nina's plain white gown to clasp her life essence in long, furrow nails, animating her nearly drained body for a brief seizure-like moment before she collapses back onto the bed. The cold, dead hands of the monsters of our collective imagination, the symbolic agents of their evil, the sensation of slimy, unearthly grips left in the minds of the audience like ghostly moorings as hawser lines drift away and get drawn up through cat holes, the last desperate holds on our demons slipping from view so the archetypes of their villainous ships might roam free in our subconscious, transporting their awful, fascinating freight of primal fear and anxiety. The ethereal residue of their malevolent clutches, a clammy protoplasm inside us as we exit the theater, telling ourselves over and over, it was just a movie. My father's hand he left inside me.
Holy shit, Mark. Holy shit. These poems are tremendous. First of all, I think it was a good call to read them together because they complement each other so perfectly. And because they're both like thematically working in the same territory. I love the way that these poems like simultaneously offer a very like mythic version of parenthood while also like being absolutely uncompromising in the way that they reveal like the like petty neuroses of parenthood too, right? Like you do this wonderful thing, especially in the first poem, right? Where you'll like go into the psychology of the parents. You'll go into like what is like what little like social anxieties and petty personal strife and stuff motivates them, and you'll do that for a little while and then you pull out and you turn them into these like mythic figures, right? You like conjure up this whole
Yes, yes.
mythic
There's sort
parents.
of something magical and mythic at the same time that they're just deeply flawed people like we
Exactly.
all are.
Exactly, Mark. And the way that you do that, the way that you work with the tension between those two forces in both of these poems is just tremendously effective. And you're doing something very similar in the Father poem too, where you like construct him as this mythic figure and then you deconstruct him. I love the way like you keep returning to specific like images throughout that poem. It's almost like you're taking him apart and to the point like you're like deconstructing him to the point at the end, like the only thing that's left is like a narrative about who he is and his hand. Like you by the
Yeah.
end of the poem, you like so like torn apart and exhausted the image of this man that the only thing that's left of him is like these like folkloric and pop culture narratives about like dark fatherhood and like the like one physical like deeply morbid physical image of him. It's both of these poems are fantastic and on and like that like and like beautifully capture that psychic tension that think exists in anyone with a complicated view of their parents, where they're both these like tremendous, almost folkloric figures, these like grand archetypes, but also, like you say, these deeply flawed, excuse me, human beings who have downstream effects on our lives, right? So yeah,
Right.
those were fantastic, Mark.
Thank you. I'm glad you liked them.
Yeah, Mark, that both of those poems are extensive in a way that I'd call them like fractal, I guess, in that like they keep going and like branching in directions you can't really anticipate or predict, but they're kind of branching inwards on themselves, and that's something that's a feature of a lot of your work that I really like how it becomes basically like one of those pictures where you zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, and then it like eventually becomes the same picture again. And that especially is really effective in this like thing with the parental narratives because it's like, oh, well, like it's a picture of like the result, like the children. It's really
Right,
it's really
right.
haunting and cool. I really love it.
Well, thank you very much, and I would agree. I think that there is that fractal sort of way of kind of swirling and eddying back into itself again. But thank you so much. I'm glad you liked it, Rudy.
Yeah. Thank you, Mark. Those were tremendous. And Bizarre is up next.
Hello. So I just have one poem, and I think I'll drop it into the chat so you can read it. All right, so this piece is called A Story of Time. A bone tossed into the air, upward falling up to the sky, a primitive toss, the first act of murder. One discovers an object that kind of looks like it could be heavy, heavy enough to break something, heavy enough to hit someone, perhaps even one of your own. At some point, someone had to discover that violence is a choice, and we never stopped choosing. A bone-shaped satellite floating in space. A black void not reachable by our ancestors. Why does this piece of the future feel familiar in the same way that ape hands look like our own? I stand in the middle of time, halfway between prehistoric and the precipice of what will be. Is this what it feels like to evolve? The embrace of a sunrise reaches beneath sheets to whisper to mind just waking up, fresh step out of a dream. The day is yours to make. Today will be the greatest day. Daylight, dearest, you keep us awake so we can achieve our dreams, working underneath afternoon sun. Something different happens when it gets dark. Body relaxes and takes shape of the evening. Mind constructing new worlds while the joints decompress. The first human arrives billions of years into the timeline, and it's jarring. We look so strange with our fleshy skin and smoothed lines beneath painted vases. We became so vibrant. Being online is like being in zero gravity. Our bodies don't need to perform that way, floating free. A man speaks through a screen to his family, light years away, working remotely. Wife and daughter live inside the screen. A space shuttle is like a subway in the sky. Public transportation is the coolest way to get around. Starting a new society on a new planet is an opportunity to reset. Constitution a love doctrine because there are no more wars. This new world was expensive to build, so we better keep it nice. Interstellar encounters, friends can really be okay in the end if we just stay connected. Humanity will have to split up at some point, so we should probably learn how to be so far apart and not get too lonely. 2 is 1, 1 is none. survival of the fiercely independent. The self-reliant can do anything they choose. Humans are encouraged to read the directions before using the zero-gravity restroom. How free-willed are we really when we rely on machines? Location is relative. 80 million miles from Earth seems so far or close. Hibernation is like sleeping without dreaming. Someday, dreams will be all that we have for ourselves. Would you trust the most reliable computer ever made? She's part of the crew, like a person. She acts like she has emotions, so we can communicate better. Thanks to her programming, we can never be sure that our feelings are real. It's a good idea to understand the machines, just in case they break our trust, lest we pick up a bone and beat them to death. The mission must proceed with or without us. Human hand in glove reaches out to touch the same monument as the apes did. I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it. Thank you.
Bizarre, I really dig this poem. I love the way that you use 2001 as this jumping off point for this really thoughtful and meditative existential poem, not just about humanity, but about technology. And you're really, I also love like how you're taking the latent themes of that film and like presenting them within the light of our contemporary situation where actually in some ways technology is more chilling than Kubrick imagined, right? Or than Clarke imagined. Especially I love like in some ways your presentation of AI, which is based on, like our contemporary experience with it, where it's more human and where like its central feature is the way that it mimics human emotionality and mimics the way humans use language, like the way that's actually scarier than Hal was, like, because there's something about that, like as you say directly in the poem, like makes us question our own humanity, right? Like Hal in 2001 forces us to question like Hal's humanity, right? Like whether Hal had arrived at some level of sentience that made him or it like have like something comparable to a human level of sense of self, right? But what AI does is it makes us question ourselves. Right? Like you see a piece of AI generated text and you see like latent hints of human emotion in it and of the way that we process things and the way we think and the way we respond on an instinctive level to reality, and we say you say shit like like am I real? And man, the way you present it in the poem too, it's so concise, it's so focused, it's just such like an effective and moving like meditation on the film. So thank you, Bizarre. That was wonderful.
Yeah,
Thank
that's. Oh, sorry. There's a line in there about the zero gravity restroom, and like it's basically like read the fucking manual before you use the zero gravity restroom. I fucking love that line. Um, but the ending, the human hand in a glove reaches out to touch the same monument the apes did, and I can feel it. I can feel it. I can feel it. Like the phantom limbness of that, like the idea of like you can feel something, like it's detached from like what your actual experience or whatever it is. That says a lot about AI. Like I think, like
you.
William mentioned, that's really fucking good.
Totally. Thank you, Rudy.
Well, thank you, Bizarre. That was awesome. And rounding out the night tonight, if he's still with us, is Sam. Sam, it's been a long time, man. Welcome back.
Uh, give me 1 second.
Sure.
This poem is called The Lady in the Hall. It's in Misery Tourism. I often hear my neighbors fight, falling asleep to dimming light, those constant beggars in the halls, and loud shouts heard through the walls. Her eyes are sunken low and frail. The lady in the hall, a lady that's pale. The boyfriend I have yet to see, yet she offers his child, his boy, to me. Still, addicts are predictably reckless, and to secure a night's rest, I knocked and ran, leaving behind $200 at their door. Now they don't live here or anywhere, and I don't sleep anymore.
Sam, I appreciate the deep cut from the Misery Tourism archives. I remember this piece. I still remember this poem, and I'm not sure you've ever actually read it on Misery Loves Company, even though I think it's the first thing of yours that we published, right?
Yeah, it's my favorite one.
You know what I love about this poem, Sam, is that it has like powerful, like Edgar Allan Poe energy. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it feels like a piece of like morbid gothic poetry, even though it's in a contemporary setting. Because it's the same, it's dealing with the same kind of themes that Poe deals with, which is like the sense of like deep, lasting, like psychologically scarring guilt over like in what is in this case like an act of basically um
I
like
wrote it when I was like
sorry Sam, yeah.
in like this shitty living situation. So I don't know.
And even like the central conceit, it's such a great noir conceit. Like, well, how do you get away with murder? Well, if they're addicts, like just give them enough money to kill themselves, right? Just and,
Yes, exactly.
and the
Fuck.
way, the like subtle way, like the very concise way that's presented in this poem, where it's like, as I said, like it has that same sense of like a piece of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry or an old piece of like noir writing, like how to commit the perfect murder, and it's all over very quickly, and it's all very concise. There's not a word wasted. It's a really effective piece, Sam, and I'm glad we could give
I
it a home
have
back when.
then I have one more
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I interrupted you. Sorry.
that's oh wait, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I didn't know I caught you between in the middle of two poems. I usually like to try to let people finish
Well,
before.
this isn't a poem, this is a long piece that's like gonna be funny, but
Yeah, no, the floor is yours.
okay. My friend is millennial. She was telling me that our kid hit his head really bad, that he had to go to the doctor and get an x-ray to see if he'd get a concussion. But he was fine. He only got a goose egg. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I wasn't going to say anything.
Sorry, I'm hearing shit outside. I gotta go. I got a bell.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe you can read this other piece later then, next week or at a future one. Anyway, I really enjoyed the poem. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
All right. And that's it. That concludes that concludes the night. So so anyway, this has been a great one, guys. As usual, it's funny. I went in as of this morning, we only had one person signed up to read, and I thought, oh no, like, will we be able to scrape together enough work to finish the night? And once again, it's a loaves and fishes situation where we almost got an overabundance of work and really great work and really fantastic writing. And so thank you to everyone who read. Thank you, Coleman, R.I.P. Coleman. Uh, thank you, Rudy. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Colton. Thank you, Jan. And thank you, Rudy, once again for lending your body to Jan. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Bizarre. And thank you, Sam. So anyway, this has been Misery Loves Company. We do this every fucking Friday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific. Anyone is welcome to come and join us. Anyone's welcome to share their work if it's an open mic. Yeah, we tweet out the link just before we begin from our Twitter account at Misery Tourism, all one word. And yeah, that's it. Thanks, guys. It's been another great one. All right. Good night.